This story is not for the faint of heart. Fear is a part of you. There's no turning back. The nightmare has begun. It all happened too fast. One moment, he was strapped into his seat, buckled up for what was supposed to be an uneventful flight. The next, the deafening roar of engines failing made the air in the cabin feel thick, suffocating. He was in a plane with no control, falling helplessly through the sky. The turbulence tossed the aircraft like a rag doll. Each violent shake sent him fear spiraling deeper into his gut. His name was Caleb. He was 28, just another average guy on an average flight. He'd been on countless flights before, the kind you book without a second thought. But today was different. The plane was going down. The warning lights flashed on. Panic seized his chest, a vice grip that tightened with every passing second. Brace for impact. The voice of the flight attendant was a distant echo, barely audible over the roar of the failing engines. The screams of the other passengers filled the air, but Caleb couldn't bring himself to look around. His focus was entirely on the rapidly descending plane. A violent crash jolted him forward. The seatbelt dug painfully into his stomach as the plane split open like a tin can. Caleb didn't know how long he had been unconscious, but when he opened his eyes, everything was wrong. The plane was gone. The world he saw was foreign, a tropical island with dense jungle and the unmistakable sound of crashing waves. It was the smell that hit him first, a thick, musky stench. Something in the air was wrong, but Caleb didn't have time to process it. His mind, still reeling from the chaos of the crash, was trying to piece together what had happened. He crawled out of the wreckage, his body trembling. The parachute was still strapped to his back, and the ground beneath him was soft, damp with the residue of the crash. The silence was unsettling, and in the distance, the hiss of something watching him. A low, slithering sound that sent chills down his spine. Caleb felt his pulse quicken, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. The air smelled like rot and something far darker, but his survival instincts kicked in. The crash had thrown him off course, and there was no sign of anyone else. Only the endless jungle and the oppressive silence. Caleb stumbled forward, his legs weak beneath him, each step an echo in the dense foliage. And then, there it was, a glint of something metallic in the sand. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be a flare? A sign of civilization? He rushed toward it, but as he did, a low hiss made him freeze. Something moved in the brush. Something large and deadly. A sudden realization hit him, like a slap in the face. The hiss he'd heard earlier wasn't the wind. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest as he backed away from the snake. His hands were shaking uncontrollably, fingers fumbling with the strap of his parachute, trying to loosen it. He had to get it off before he became a target. The snake, its eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence, slithered closer. Its body was long and sinuous, a golden pattern flashing between the green foliage. The sound of its tongue flicking out, tasting the air, filled his ears. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to flee, but his legs refused to cooperate. He was rooted in place, paralyzed by fear. The jungle around him felt alive, as if it were closing in on him. The hiss grew louder. In a sudden burst of energy, Caleb stumbled backward, his feet tangling in the thick roots of the jungle floor. He fell, hitting the ground with a harsh thud. The world spun around him as he scrambled to get up. But the snake had already advanced, its slithering hiss a promise of impending doom. "Get up, Caleb," he whispered to himself, his voice shaky. He had to think fast. He couldn't let the fear take over. But what could he do? He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for any of this. He finally managed to scramble to his feet, but not fast enough. The snake lunged. The sharp pain in his leg was immediate, a searing heat that shot up his spine. Caleb gasped, his hands reaching down to find the wound. Blood, warm and sticky, oozed from a deep puncture on his calf. The snake's fangs were embedded deep in his flesh, and he could feel its venom pumping into his bloodstream. Panic set in as his vision blurred. He could already feel the effects. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. His muscles began to stiffen. He couldn't think. His mind raced through every survival show he'd ever watched, trying to recall what he should do. But nothing was coming to him. The snake slithered back, his job done. It had struck, leaving Caleb to die slowly. As the venom coursed through his body, he stumbled backward into the dense brush. He collapsed against a large tree, struggling to stay conscious. "Stay awake," he muttered to himself, but his own voice sounded distant. Everything around him seemed to darken, as though the world itself were drowning in shadows. His hands shook violently as he reached for the first aid kit strapped to his parachute, but it was no use. His fingers wouldn't work. His head swam with dizziness, his thoughts fragmented like broken glass. He could barely hold his eyes open now. Was this it? Was he going to die here, alone, on an island with nothing but snakes for company? He felt his consciousness slip away, the weight of his eyelids growing heavier with each passing second. The ground beneath him felt unnervingly soft. His vision darkened, and for a moment, he thought he could hear voices, whispering to him from somewhere beyond. He didn't know if they were real. He didn't know if he was still awake. And then, as if from nowhere, a loud crash echoed through the jungle, followed by a deep guttural growl. Caleb's body froze. His heart skipped a beat. The sound didn't belong to any animal he knew. It was closer than the snake, and whatever it was were coming for him. The growl echoed through the jungle, sending a ripple of terror through Caleb's already fragile mind. His body was growing numb, and his vision continued to blur, the edges of the world softening like a fading dream. But that sound, that primal growl deep and vibrating through the earth, cut through the haze of his impending unconsciousness. He couldn't let go. He couldn't die here. Caleb forced his eyes open. The venom was clouding his thoughts, making everything feel like a nightmare, but he couldn't focus on that now. The growl wasn't a figment of his delirium. It was real, and it was moving closer. With every ragged breath, Caleb tried to steady himself, his heart slamming in his chest. He pushed himself up, leaning against the tree for support, trying to stand. But his leg buckled, the poison moving faster through his bloodstream. The bite had been deep, and now his body was betraying him. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused to obey. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by a rustle in the bushes. The sound wasn't like any animal Caleb knew. It was a low, guttural growl, almost human. He turned toward the noise, struggling to focus through the haze of pain. A shadow moved in the undergrowth, too large to be a simple animal, too deliberate in its movements to be just a predator. A chill crept down Caleb's spine. He knew this wasn't just a snake. It wasn't just a jungle creature. Whatever was coming for him was something else. Desperation surged within him. He had to act. He stumbled forward, clutching the tree for balance. The air felt heavier now, thick with an unnatural stillness. The jungle, which moments ago had been alive with the sounds of wildlife, was eerily quiet. Then, in an instant, it emerged. A massive, hulking figure stepped from the shadows, its form nearly swallowed by the dense foliage. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural yellow hue, glowing faintly in the dark. The creature was humanoid in shape, but its movements were unnervingly fast, as though it were an apex predator blending human and animal traits. Caleb's breath hitched. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was something he had never encountered before. Something wrong. The thing was too tall, its limbs elongated, covered in a patchy layer of matted fur and scaly skin. It was like something from a nightmare, some twisted hybrid of man and beast, its mouth hanging slightly open, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. The growl again, closer. Caleb's mind screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The venom had made sure of that. He was paralyzed, standing in the middle of the jungle with a twisted monster bearing down on him. He felt it before he saw it. The presence behind him, like something watching him from the depths of the jungle. Something was closing in from every angle. The jungle, the venom, the growls. It was all converging on him. But this thing, this creature, was something else entirely. Caleb's breathing was erratic, his mind spinning, fighting against the waves of panic. His body was no longer his own, moving in slow motion, as if each second was stretching out in agony. The creature lunged. Caleb didn't have time to react. His world shattered into a violent burst of motion as the thing grabbed him, its claws digging into his skin. His body felt like it was being torn apart, but somehow he didn't scream. His body was already too weak, too numb. Then everything stopped. The creature's grip loosened, and Caleb fell to the ground, the jungle floor beneath him soft and unforgiving. He had no strength left. His vision was fading again, his body slipping in and out of consciousness. And then, as the final waves of darkness closed in, Caleb heard a whisper, "Run." Caleb's chest heaved with ragged breaths, his skin slick with sweat as the darkness closed in. His mind was a blur, fragmented thoughts flickering in and out. The venom in his veins made his limbs heavy, each movement a struggle, but he couldn't stop. He couldn't let go now. The jungle around him seemed alive, an unholy symphony of whispers and rustling. But that whisper, it wasn't just in his head. It was real. Help. He froze. Was someone else here? His eyes snapped open, scanning the shadows, trying to focus. The voice was faint but distinct. Help. His mind screamed that it had to be the venom, but the desperation in that voice, he couldn't ignore it. With a groan, Caleb forced himself onto shaky legs, his body screaming in protest. His heart raced, but his mind was clearer than before. He wasn't alone on this island. Someone, or something, was out there. The whisper came again. "Help me. Please." Caleb's chest tightened. The voice sounded human, but in the jungle, who could say what was real? The creatures here were beyond anything he had ever imagined. He'd seen the creature before. Whatever it was, it wasn't human. And yet, the voice? Panic crept in. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the jungle sounds. But the voice called him forward, drawing him deeper into the thicket. Step by step, he moved forward, his vision swimming as the venom clawed at him. His body felt like it was made of stone, but he pushed through the pain. The voice, it was coming from deeper in the jungle. He stumbled through the thick underbrush, sweat running down his forehead. Every breath felt like he was suffocating. The whispers seemed to surround him, but the voice was becoming more distinct. "Help me." Finally, he broke through the trees into a small clearing. He staggered to a halt, heart pounding in his chest. In the center of the clearing, a man knelt on the ground, his face twisted in agony, his eyes wide with fear. Blood soaked his shirt, his body broken and battered. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. The man's mouth opened, but the words that came out were different now, like a hollow echo. "Help me," he repeated, his voice trembling. But before Caleb could react, the air shifted. A low growl resonated from the trees, and the ground trembled slightly beneath Caleb's feet. He didn't need to turn around to know what it was. He had felt it before. The creature. It stepped out from the shadows. The same hulking figure, its yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. The air seemed to thicken, a sense of impending doom pressing down on him. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs, and his legs trembled, unable to move. The creature locked eyes with him, its grin spreading wider, showing sharp, jagged teeth. And then it spoke, its voice a guttural rasp. "Your turn." Caleb's pulse skyrocketed. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The venom, the creature, he was trapped, and there was nowhere to run. The thing moved closer, its growl vibrating the air around him, and in an instant, it lunged. Before Caleb could even react, the creature grabbed the man in the center of the clearing. Its claws raked through flesh, tearing into him with sickening precision. The man didn't scream. His body simply gave way, his blood splattering the earth. The thing devoured him with horrifying speed, and Caleb could only watch, frozen in terror. The creature paused, its glowing eyes now focused entirely on him. Caleb couldn't move, couldn't speak. The whisper came again, low and chilling. "Run!" But it was too late. Caleb's heart raced, his chest tight with terror. The creature's eyes burned into him, its yellow gaze piercing the darkness of the jungle. His legs felt like lead, his body refusing to move. Every instinct told him to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The venom coursing through his veins made it impossible to think clearly, let alone flee. The creature stepped closer, its massive form almost filling the clearing, the air around it thick with its malevolent presence. Caleb could feel its breath, hot, foul, and the sickening growl that emanated from deep within its chest. It was right in front of him now, and its eyes never left his. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and Caleb's world narrowed to just the creature and the oppressive darkness around him. Then, without warning, the creature spoke in that same guttural voice, its words chilling. "Why? Did you come here?" Caleb couldn't answer. His throat was dry, his mind clouded by fear and venom. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His body refused to cooperate. The creature's gaze shifted, scanning the jungle, its nostrils flaring as if it were smelling something. Caleb barely dared to breathe, his body trembling, but the creature's attention had drifted. It was as if it was waiting for something. Then the voice came again, but this time it wasn't the creature's voice. "Caleb." It was the same whisper from before, the one that had been calling to him. It wasn't just in his head anymore. The voice was real, clear, and urgent. But where was it coming from? Who was it? The creature, sensing Caleb's distraction, snarled and snapped its claws, sending a jolt of panic through him. Its eyes locked back onto his, and the creature began to advance again. Caleb's body surged with adrenaline, and in that instant, his mind screamed at him to move. Run. Move now. But his legs were slow, dragging through the thick underbrush, his feet stumbling over roots and rocks. He could feel the creature's presence behind him, could hear its growl growing louder, closer. The voice came again, urgent, pleading. "Caleb, you can't escape. Not yet." Caleb froze. The voice wasn't just guiding him, it was mocking him. But why? Who was it? Before he could answer, the jungle around him seemed to twist. The trees shifted, the ground beneath him changed, and Caleb felt himself falling into a void. He stumbled, trying to regain his balance, but the jungle seemed to fight him, its dense roots tangling around his feet, pulling him further into the dark. The air grew colder, heavier, and the growl of the creature had stopped. A deep silence settled in the space around him, more oppressive than anything he'd ever experienced. Caleb stopped and listened, heart hammering in his chest. Something was wrong. And then, in the distance, he saw a figure. Barely more than a silhouette at first, it moved slowly toward him, the shadows seeming to part as it drew near. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. His heart skipped a beat. Who was it? The figure stopped in front of him, just beyond the reach of the dim light that filtered through the trees. Caleb squinted, but the figure remained obscured, its face hidden in the darkness. "Who are you?" Caleb asked, his voice hoarse. The figure didn't answer immediately. It stood still like a statue, before finally speaking in a voice that sent chills down Caleb's spine. "You shouldn't have come here, Caleb." And just like that, the shadows seemed to close in around him. The figure vanished, and the jungle once again erupted into chaos. Caleb's lungs burned as he sprinted through the jungle, his thoughts fractured, his body on the edge of collapse. The venom was spreading, the fog in his mind thickening with every step. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't afford to stop. The growl of the creature echoed through the trees, followed by the unmistakable sound of its massive feet pounding the ground behind him. The jungle was no longer a place of refuge. Every shadow felt alive. Every rustle of leaves was a threat. Caleb's breath came in ragged gasps. His legs felt heavier with each stride, and his vision blurred. The voice, distant but familiar, echoed in his mind. "Caleb, escape. You have to escape." He stumbled, falling to his knees for a moment, his hands scraping against the dirt. His heart thundered in his chest, and he pushed himself back to his feet, forcing his body to keep moving. The air was thick with humidity, the smell of decay, and something worse, something that twisted his stomach. His feet hit the ground hard, and his mind screamed at him to keep going, but the jungle was closing in. The trees seemed to bend toward him, their shadows stretching like claws. "Caleb, ... The voice came again, louder this time. And then, through the fog, Caleb saw it, a faint light in the distance, a flicker of hope. He pushed forward, stumbling, crawling, dragging his weary body through the dense underbrush. As he neared the light, The growl of the creature grew louder. He could hear it, closer now, almost on top of him. Caleb reached the source of the light, a small clearing. In the center, an old wooden hut stood, decaying but still intact. Without thinking, Caleb rushed toward it, his hand reaching for the door. It was unlocked. He swung it open and slammed it shut behind him, locking the door with trembling hands. His chest heaved as he leaned against the door, trying to catch his breath. His mind was spinning, the venom taking its toll. But he couldn't stop now. He had to make it out. He had to survive. The voice came again. It was stronger now, but it wasn't just in his head. It was outside the door, coming from the jungle. Caleb. The voice sounded like a plea, but Caleb didn't trust it. He couldn't. He backed away from the door, his heart racing. He could hear movement outside, the faint sounds of the creature circling the hut. The floor creaked beneath him, and he froze listening. Then the door rattled. The creature was trying to get in. A soft whisper echoed in Caleb's mind. "It's not safe in here." Caleb's eyes darted around the room. There was nothing, just dust, old furniture, and shadows. But in the far corner, a small window was cracked open. He approached it cautiously, every sense on edge. The creature's growl grew louder, closer. He reached for the window, pulling it open just enough to squeeze through. He had no choice. The hut was no sanctuary. He had to keep moving. With one final glance over his shoulder, Caleb slipped through the window and dropped to the ground outside. He didn't look back. The jungle was silent, suffocating. Caleb's heart raced in his chest as he stumbled through the dense underbrush, his legs nearly giving out beneath him. The venom had fully taken over, clouding his thoughts, making everything blur together. He could barely see, barely think. The growl was gone. The creature had stopped chasing him. But Caleb knew it wasn't over. It can't be over. His breath came in shallow gasps, the air thick with moisture and the weight of impending doom. He moved forward mechanically, one step after the other, as if his body were running on pure instinct. There had to be an escape. There had to be. He saw a shadow ahead, but it wasn't the creature. No, it was something else. Something he hadn't seen before. A faint, flickering light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pull him forward. His mind screamed at him to go faster, to reach it before it was too late. The light grew brighter as he moved closer, revealing what appeared to be an old, abandoned shack, barely standing but still intact. Caleb didn't care. He couldn't care anymore. All he could focus on was that light, the hope that it might be the way out. His hands were shaking as he reached the door, twisting the knob with effort. The door creaked as it opened, revealing nothing but darkness inside. But he couldn't stop. He needed to be inside, needed to find shelter, something that could protect him. As he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him. He froze, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. The silence in the hut was deafening, the darkness suffocating. Then he heard it. Caleb. The voice again. The same voice. The one he had heard from the very beginning. It came from the darkness, low and guttural. Caleb's breath caught in his throat as the shadows around him seemed to move. They began to twist and form shapes, shapes that shouldn't exist. He backed away, his heart hammering in his chest. His mind screamed for him to escape, but his legs refused to obey. The shadows closed in, and Caleb couldn't move. "Caleb," the voice whispered again, "you should have stayed out of the jungle." A figure emerged from the darkness, its form shadowy and indistinct at first. But as it stepped into the faint light, Caleb's blood ran cold. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything he could comprehend. The figure moved toward him, slow and deliberate, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Caleb's body refused to move as it came closer, its presence suffocating. "No, no," Caleb cried, his voice a mere whisper. "Please." The figure didn't respond. Instead, it reached out, its hand cold and unnatural, and in that moment, Caleb knew. He knew it was too late. There was no escape. There was no hope. The figure touched his chest, and the world around him went dark. The jungle swallowed Caleb whole. His body was never found. The whispers that had plagued him faded into nothing, and the jungle returned to its oppressive silence. But if you listen closely, if you walk in the jungle at night, you might hear it, a faint whisper carried on the wind, a warning.